As a manager who is an active ally, these are the things that we could do to prevent conflict or tackle conflict, especially as they are tied to DEI, but even outside of DEI. Like I said, conflict management is a huge conversation, but one that I'll highlight right now. So one is creating a sense of safety. Like I always say, I mentioned before, comfort is an option. Not everyone's going to feel comfortable in the workplace. Discomfort is where you're stretched, where you can grow. Safety is another piece where people have to feel safe in their environment. And when they feel safe, safety has to do with, they feel safe, for example, disagreeing with someone. They feel safe if they disagree with their manager, with you, their manager. They can say, they know how to, they have the language and they have the space to respectfully and professionally disagree. And sometimes you have to create the space for them to do that because they're not going to be willing to just do that on their own. So you have to almost give them permission. And the best way to do it is to ask an open-ended question of, where might we disagree on this? What might be a different way of looking at this? What might I be missing, right? This literally gives them permission, and it doesn't sound like a trick question when you position it that way. Also, giving them the space to share their concerns. If they don't feel like they're part of the organization, if they feel like they're discriminated against, if they've experienced biases, if they experience microaggressions, they feel like they can say something, whether it's to you directly, and if they feel like they experience microaggressions from you, they feel at least safe enough to go to their talent and people or human resources advocates. And so safety involves them feeling like they can share their disagreement, and they also know how to, the process, they understand the process of how to bubble up their concerns. Another is recognition. The second is recognition. So being able to, because remember, we talked about fear, scarcity, and exclusion, right? These are the things that create conflict. But if you're recognizing people, even if they're metrics and numbers and they're not always hitting their targets, but they're still contributing in certain ways, you want to recognize people. And it's not always monetary. It doesn't always have to be rewards. But recognition allows people to know they have a clear sense of what behaviors they should continue to conduct that are effectively contributing to success of the business. And recognition keeps people motivated. It makes them feel valued. They feel like they belong. The third thing that we can do to mitigate conflict is really discuss a shared vision, right? This motivates people. This is what keeps people feeling included. This is what allows us to focus, to recognize our differences, but focus on what we share, what we have in common. And what we have in common is our shared vision for the organization, for the team, our targets. So it's important to make sure that there's a clear sense of the vision and everyone is clear on what their role is in contributing to that vision. So therefore, there's a lack of scarcity and competition because each person understands how they add value to the vision. And that's how they're being measured. So that's number 3. Now, all these 3 things, safety, recognition, and vision, contributes to this idea of the overarching concept, which is belonging. When people feel like they belong to an organization, to a team, to a vision, to an idea, it minimizes conflict. When people feel like they belong in a conversation, a heated conversation that could be tense, polarizing, around race, maybe it's around race and racism. When they feel like they belong in that conversation, in spite of what they look like, in spite of being part of whatever group or background, when they feel like they belong, they're not defensive. They're not as fearful. They don't feel excluded. They feel included. And therefore, there's less conflict, right? There's less conflict because they're in conversation, they're in dialogue. They're not in attack mode, they're not shut down, and they're not attacking through harsh words or harsh tones. They're in dialogue, they're in discussion, they're in conversation because they're focusing on understanding one another.